This is my story. For 6 years, I lived in fear, paying a debt left by my dead husband. When doubts grew, I followed the truth and discovered he was alive, hiding behind lies, fraud, and crime. He had faked his death to escape his past, leaving me and our son Emito to suffer. In the end, justice was served, and I reclaimed my life, strength, and freedom. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe. Get ready for real emotional and thrilling stories from Black adults that will keep you hooked till the end. My name is Hannah Brooks, and for the last 6 years, my life has been ruled by one-word debt, not the kind that comes with statements or phone calls, not the type that can be negotiated or forgiven. This debt lived in silence, every month. On the same day, I would wake before dawn. I'd count the bills twice at the kitchen table while my son Noah slept in the next room. Then I'd slide the money into a plain white envelope. No note, no name, no name. Just cash always cashed out by 7 a.m. I'd be standing in front of a crumbling brick building on the south side of Chicago. The paint peeled from the door and the hallway smelled of dust and old regrets. I never knocked. I never rang the bell. I would kneel, slide the envelope under the door, and leave out the people behind that door were Richard and Elaine Brooks, my in-laws. The parents of my late husband, Ethan. They never thanked me. They never asked how I was doing. They never asked about their grandson. They barely spoke to me at all. 6 years ago, I was told Ethan had died in a construction site accident, a steel beam, a moment of bad luck. That was the story I was given, and at the time I was too broken to question it. Before his death, Ethan had borrowed money, about $9,500, they said, emergency expenses, a short-term loan. Something he meant to pay back quickly, after the funeral. While I was still learning how to breathe without him, Richard told me I needed to handle what Ethan left behind. I remember standing in their living room, holding my son in my arms, still dressed in black. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten me. He just stared at the wall and said, "Family takes responsibility." So I agreed. At first, I thought it would be temporary, a few months, maybe a year. I picked up extra shifts at work, sold my wedding ring, and kept meals so Noah wouldn't have to. But the balance never seemed to shrink. Every time I asked how much was left, Elaine would say the same thing. "You're almost there." Almost there became years. 6 years later, I had paid far more than the original amount. I knew it. I had done the math again and again late at night, scribbling numbers on scrap paper, trying to make sense of something that refused to add up. If the debt was only $9,500. Why was it still there? I tried to ask questions once. Richard didn't look at me. Elaine's eyes went cold. "You don't want to reopen old wounds," she said. So I stopped asking. Instead, I lived smaller. I avoided friends. I never talked about money. I taught my son to understand phrases like, "maybe next time," and "we don't need that right now." I told myself this was the price of responsibility, the cost of being loyal, the burden of love, but something never felt right. Richard and Elaine lived poorly, almost too poorly. The building was falling apart, yet they never seemed worried. They never struggled the way I did. They never worked, never moved, never improved their situation. And still, they watched me as I owed them something beyond money. The worst part wasn't the payments. It was the way they looked through me. Every time I saw them, they avoided my eyes, as if I reminded them of something they didn't want to face. As if my presence made them uncomfortable. I told myself it was grief. People handle loss differently, I said. Maybe seeing me reminded them of their son. But deep down, a quiet question kept growing louder. What if Ethan hadn't left behind just debt? Late at night, after Noah fell asleep, I would replay memories in my head, small things I had ignored before. Ethan spying secretive, phone calls he took outside, his sudden need for cash, things I brushed off as stress. Things I wished I had paid attention to. I didn't know it yet, but the debt that controlled my life wasn't just financial. It was the first thread in a lie that had been wrapped around me for 6 long years, and soon, I was going to pull it. It started with a whisper, soft, careless, and almost kind. I was in the basement laundry room of my apartment building, feeding quarters into a machine that rattled as if it might collapse at any second. The air smelled of detergent and damp concrete. It was the kind of place where people kept their heads down and conversations short. I wasn't looking for answers that day. I was just trying to get through another routine. That's when she spoke. An older woman sat on a plastic chair near the wall, folding towels with slow, deliberate movements. I had seen her before but never spoken to her. Her hair was silver and pulled back tightly, her eyes sharp in a way that suggested she noticed more than she said. She looked at me and smiled faintly. "You look tired, dear," she said. I nodded politely, not trusting my voice. Exhaustion had become my permanent state. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a secret. "I saw a man last week," she said, "who looked just like your husband." My hands froze on a damp shirt. I laughed too quickly, too loudly. "That's not possible," I said. "My husband passed away." She didn't argue. She did in single quotes TAPOLOGIC. She simply continued folding. "I know what I saw," she said calmly. "Same face, same walk, just a heavier beard." My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I forced another laugh, this one sharper. "A lot of people look alike." She finally looked up at me then. Her expression wasn't curious. It wasn't dramatic. It was certain. I left my clothes half dry and carried the basket upstairs with shaking hands. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, her words echoed in my head. Same face, same walk. I told myself it was a coincidence. A stranger. A grieving mind looking for ghosts, but doubt is a dangerous thing. Once it settles in, it refuses to stay quiet. At 2 a.m., while my son Noah slept curled up in his bed, I pulled out the folder I had avoided for years, the one labeled Ethan Brooks. Inside were documents I had never truly read. I had been too heartbroken, too trusting. This time, I read everything. There was no official police report. No incident number. No witness statements. No accident photographs. I searched again, slower this time, my fingers turning each page with growing unease. There was no medical examiner's report. No hospital records. No formal identification of a body. Just one piece of paper, a cremation certificate. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The signature at the bottom, supposedly verifying the process, was barely legible, smudged, unclear. Almost like it had been rushed. I checked the date. It was 3 days after the supposed accident. Too fast. My chest tightened as realization crept in. When Ethan died, I never saw him. No viewing. No final goodbye. Richard and Elaine had told me it was better that way. The injuries were severe. That I should remember him as he was. At the time, their words had sounded merciful. Now, they felt calculated. I opened my laptop and searched for records, construction accidents. OSHA reports, news articles, something, anything. There was nothing. No mention of Ethan Brooks. No side incident matched the story I had been told. I leaned back in my chair, my hands covering my face. Grief had made me blind. Fear had kept me obedient. And trust had trapped me. The next morning, I watched Richard and Elaine's building from across the street longer than I ever had before. I noticed things I hadn't questioned before: deliveries at odd hours, visitors who didn't stay long, the way Richard always seemed to be waiting for something. Or someone. The whisper in the laundry room had done what 6 years of suffering had not. It had cracked the surface of my reality. And once a lie begins to show itself, it can't be unseen. I didn't know yet what I would find, but I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Ethan's death wasn't just suspicious. It was incomplete. And for the first time since the day I buried him, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid of how long I had lived without it. Once doubt entered my life, it refused to leave. I didn't have training. I wasn't a detective. I was just a woman who had been lied to for too long. But lies leave footprints, and I decided to follow them the only way I knew how: quietly, patiently, and on paper. I started small. Bank statements. Every envelope I had slipped under Richard and Elaine's door over the years suddenly felt heavier in my memory. I logged into my old banking accounts, pulling records from as far back as I could go, month after month. Payment after payment. The pattern was too consistent to be accidental. The money didn't disappear into household expenses. It didn't go toward bills or repairs. Instead, it moved into a shared account, one that carried both Richard and Elaine's names. At first, that didn't seem unusual. Until I looked closer. Every month, within 24 hours of my payment, there was a cash withdrawal for nearly the same amount. No transfers, no checks. Just cash, clean and untraceable. Again and again. And again, my stomach tightened as the realization settled in. This wasn't repayment. This was a collection. I pulled. Out old emails next. Messages from Ethan during the months before his accident. At the time, I had skimmed them, distracted by daily life and new motherhood. Now I read every word, short sentences. Vague excuses, promises to fix things soon. One email stood out. If anything happens, don't ask questions. Trust my parents. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Why would a man planning a normal future write something like that? I dug deeper, searching archived messages, old cloud backups. Anything I could find. I discovered messages between Ethan and someone named CT. The emails were brief and coded. Deadline moved. Need more time. Cash only. My hand shook as I scrolled. This wasn't a man borrowing for groceries. This was desperation. I followed the account activity further back and found something that made my breath catch. A routing number connected to a second location. A forwarding address attached to a shell account. It took hours of searching public databases and old utility records. But eventually, an address appeared. It wasn't a home. It was an abandoned warehouse. Sitting on the outskirts of downtown Chicago. No registered business. No current tenants. Just a structure listed as inactive. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the wall. A warehouse didn't collect debt, people did. That was the moment I realized I couldn't do this alone. I called my cousin Ryan Miller. We hadn't spoken in months, but he answered on the second ring. Ryan, I said, my voice unsteady. I think Ethan might not be dead. There was silence on the other end. Then he said carefully, tell me everything. I explained the money, the account, the cash withdrawals, the emails, the warehouse. When I finished, Ryan didn't rush to comfort me. He didn't tell me I was imagining things. He said something far more frightening. If this is real, he said, then this isn't just deception. I waited. It's a crime. The word landed heavily in the air between us. Fraud, conspiracy, extortion, possibilities I had never allowed myself to consider. Ryan suggested we document everything. Screenshots, statements, timestamps. He warned me not to confront anyone, yet not Richard, not Elaine, and definitely not whoever was connected to that warehouse. They already think you're obedient, he said. That's your advantage. That night, I printed every record and spread them across my kitchen table. The story told itself in numbers and dates. A life engineered to drain me quietly. I looked at Noah sleeping on the couch, clutching his favorite blanket, unaware that his childhood had been financed by a lie. My fear turned into something sharper. Resolved that the money had led me this far. And I knew where it was pointing next. To the truth. To Ethan. And to a place where the dead should never be seen walking. Asterisk, we didn't rush in. Ryan was clear about that. If you're right, he said, we need proof, not emotions. So we waited. The warehouse sat on the edge of downtown Chicago, a forgotten block of concrete and rust wedged between abandoned rail lines and empty lots. The windows are boarded up, the metal doors stained with age and graffiti. Nothing about it suggested life, but life was there. We parked across the street in Ryan's car, engine off, the city's distant hum filling the silence. I pulled my coat tighter around me as the cold crept in. My hands trembled not from the temperature, but from the weight of what I was about to learn. Hours passed. Cars came and went on the main road, their headlights sweeping briefly across the warehouse before disappearing. I kept my eyes on the door, afraid that if I looked away, I'd miss everything. Then it happened. The metal door creaked open. I stopped breathing. A shadow stepped out first, tall and familiar. He paused, scanning the street like someone who had done this many times before. Then he moved into the light. My chest tightened, so sharply it felt like pain. It was Ethan, not a ghost, not a memory, not a mistake. Alive, breathing, laughing. His hair was longer, his beard thicker, but the face was unmistakable. The way he shifted his weight, the way he smiled. The man I had mourned for 6 years stood 20 yards away, completely real. Beside him was Cole Turner, Ethan's old friend. I remembered him from barbecues and birthdays. He used to clap Ethan on the back and call him brother. Now they stood together as if nothing had ever happened. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. Hannah, you need to record this. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with shock. I hit record, then took photos one after another, making sure the timestamp was visible. Every second mattered, even leaned against the doorframe. Laughing at something Cole said. He looked relaxed. Comfortable, happy, the sight crushed me, 6 years of scraping by. 6 years apologizing to my son for things I couldn't afford. 6 years of waking up with guilt, believing I was paying for a dead man's mistakes. And there he was alive, untouched by the sacrifices made in his name. I watched as Cole handed him something cash, folded thick. Ethan counted it casually. Before slipping it into his pocket, my stomach turned. This wasn't survival, this was a system. Lied built carefully and maintained monthly by my obedience. Ryan adjusted the camera angle, capturing every detail. If lighting a cigarette. Color checking. The street. The warehouse door closed behind them, proof, cold. Irrefutable proof. I wanted to scream his name. I wanted to run across the street and demand answers. I wanted him to see what he had done to us, but I stayed still, because rage would only protect. Evidence would destroy him, as the door slammed shut, my vision blurred. Tears streamed down my face, silent and unstoppable. I wasn't crying for the man who stood behind that door. I was crying for the woman I had been, the one who trusted. The one who believed. The one who paid. Ryan placed a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said. I nodded, though nothing felt right. That night, as we drove away, I replayed the footage again and again. Every laugh, every step. Every lie captured in high definition. 6 years. My work. My tears, my son's sacrifices, all was built on a lie that had been breathing the entire time. The man who should have been dead was very much alive, and now. So was the truth. I went in alone. Ryan offered to come with me, but I shook my head. This wasn't a moment that needed witnesses. It needed truth spoken directly, without shields. The warehouse door was heavier than it looked. Cold metal pressed against my palm as I pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old oil. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor, broken only by a single hanging light that flickered like it might give up at any second. Ethan stood near a folding table. When he turned and saw me, the color drained from his face. For a moment, he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared like a man looking at a memory that wasn't supposed to be real. Hannah, he whispered. Hearing my name in his voice hurt more than silence ever could. You were dead, I said. My voice was steady, even though my hands weren't. You didn't die. You killed us. His mouth opened, then closed. He took a step back, as if distance could protect him. I was running from dead, he said finally. I didn't have a choice. This was temporary. Temporary. The word echoed in my head like a bad joke. Temporary? I repeated. My son grew up without a father. I worked 2 jobs. I paid money I didn't owe. I slept next to grief for 6 years. He looked away. Temporary? I said again. My child's childhood? My sleep? My life? Silence fell between us, thick and suffocating. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like an animal trapped in a cage. You don't understand what it was like, he said. The pressure, the threats. I thought if I disappeared, everything would calm down. And what about us? I asked. Did we calm down too? He didn't answer. I stepped closer. Not to attack him. To see him clearly for the first time, without love blurring the edges. You let your parents drain me, I said quietly. You watched me struggle while you hid. His shoulders slumped. I told them to keep it going, he admitted. Just until I could fix things. Fix things with my money. With my silence. With my pain. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. You didn't fix anything. You buried it, and you buried us with it. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were wet, but there was no relief in them, only fear. I was going to come back, he said. I just needed time. I shook my head. Time doesn't undo lies, I said. It deepens them. He opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came. His excuses had run out. I realized then that the man standing in front of me wasn't the one I married. That man would never have chosen survival over his child. This man did. I took a step back. This is the last time you get to speak to me without consequences. I said. He swallowed hard. Hannah, he said, his voice breaking. Please. I turned away, because some betrayals don't deserve closure. They deserve the truth, and justice was waiting. Just outside that door, I never wanted to return to that place. The building stood hollow and broken, its walls damp, its silence screaming louder than words ever could. The air felt heavier there, as if it remembered everything that had been buried inside it. Ethan stood across from me. The same face. The same voice, but the man I had married was gone. I took a slow breath, grounding myself before speaking. Why? I asked. Why commit something this big, Ethan? My voice didn't shake, even though my heart did. Why pretend to die? Why destroy all of us? He lowered his head. For a long moment, there was nothing between us but the sound of our breathing. Then he spoke. I borrowed too much money, Hannah, he said quietly. Far more than I could ever repay. I stayed silent. When the deadline passed, they started coming to me, he continued. Calls, threats, people are showing up at my door. I had nothing left to give them. His hands trembled as he spoke. One night, things went wrong. An argument turned into a struggle. I pushed him. He swallowed hard. He fell. And he didn't get back up. The words froze my blood. I never meant to kill anyone, he said, his voice breaking. But that moment changed everything. I panicked. I ran. And I've been hiding ever since. I looked at him, really looked at him. So you sacrificed us, I said slowly. Your wife, your son. Our lives just to protect your freedom. He didn't respond. Shame sat heavy on his face. But it didn't move me. Fear may explain your choices, I said, stepping back. But it does not excuse them. One life was lost, I continued. And you stole ours. I turned away. I didn't look back, because some truths don't ask for forgiveness. They demand consequences. The next steps were quiet but decisive. I hired a lawyer. I submitted every piece of evidence we had gathered bank. Statements, transaction trails, videos, photographs, timestamps, emails, and recorded conversations. The story Ethan had tried to bury unfolded clearly on paper. The police were brought in. This time there was no silence. No avoidance. No denial. The charges were formal and final. Fraud. Financial exploitation. Faking a death. Conspiracy. Richard and Elaine Brooks were arrested first. Watching them in handcuffs was surreal. They had drained me without ever raising their voices, stealing years of my life with polite distance and calculated calm. Cole Turner followed, and finally, Ethan. When they took him away, he looked at me one last time. I didn't return his gaze. Some people are not owed closure. Justice doesn't knock softly. It arrives with weight. That night I slept without fear for the first time in years. The lie that had controlled my life was finally exposed, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined me. The truth had done its work. Today, I'm free from debt. The words still feel unreal when I say them out loud. For years, debt wasn't just a number, it was a shadow that followed me everywhere, whispering fear into every decision. Now that shadow is gone. My son, Noah, laughs again, not the careful, quiet laugh of a child who senses his mother's worry, but the full, unrestrained sound of joy. It fills our small apartment in the mornings, echoing off walls that no longer feel like they're closing in on us. And I sleep. Deep, uninterrupted sleep, the kind I forgot existed. No more calculating numbers in the dark. No more waking up with dread sitting heavy on my chest. The wounds I carry haven't disappeared. They surface in unexpected moments, in a passing memory, a familiar voice, a sudden silence. Trauma doesn't vanish just because justice arrives, but it no longer defines me. For a long time, I believed survival meant enduring, staying quiet, paying the price for someone else's mistakes. I thought strength was obedience. I was wrong. Strength is choosing truth when lies feel safer. Strength is walking away without looking back. Strength is protecting your child, even when it means facing everything you feared. I used to measure my life in losses. A husband. A future. Years I would never get back. Now I measure it differently. In mornings when the sun feels gentle instead of harsh. In meals shared without anxiety. In laughter that doesn't feel borrowed. Justice didn't give me my past back, but it gave me my voice. Noah asked me once, not long ago, if his father would ever come home. I knelt beside him and told him the truth, not all of it, but enough. Some people make choices they can't undo, I said. But that doesn't mean we stop living. He nodded, accepting it with the quiet wisdom only children seem to have. That night, as I watched him sleep, I realized something profound. I wasn't raising a child in the shadow of loss anymore. I was raising him in the light of honesty. I think about Ethan sometimes not with anger, not with longing, but with clarity. The man I loved existed once. The man who betrayed us chose to disappear long before he faked his death, and I let him stay gone. I learned that sometimes the people who die aren't really gone at all. They continue breathing somewhere else, untouched by the damage they caused. And sometimes the people who stay alive are the ones who must fight hardest to remain whole. I am not the woman I was 6 years ago. That woman was exhausted, afraid, obedient to pain. I am stronger now, not because I endured, but because I refused to anymore. This was my story, not of revenge, but of reclamation. Not of loss, but of awakening. And now this is my new beginning.